Last week, I was going home aboard an Enviro 200 bus when I had another wave of random thoughts wash over in my mind, so I quickly made notes of them for a future video. This time, I'll be rattling off these thoughts over footage recorded during a run on the Great Western Levels route in Train Simulator, with our noble steed being something that's completely out of place for the region. This is the Southeastern and Chatham Railway D-Class 440 number 737, and on a personal note, I had the chance to see 737 in real life when I went to the National Railway Museum back in April, and she's the only SECR locomotive that I've seen in person. I was originally going to use a Great Western Railway 9400 class 060 pannier tank, specifically one that shares her number with one of KiwiRail's DL locomotives, but plans have since changed, and I refer you to my recent video about Caledonia Works for context. Throughout the rest of today's video, I'll use real-life footage as and when it's appropriate, and as a quick word of warning, this video contains occasional swearing, so viewer discretion is advised. I am not, nor have I ever been, a fan of the renaming of Auckland's Britomart railway station. Instead of launching into a full-blown rant that would involve political topics, I'll summarise my thoughts by using the old phrase, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I will continue to address the station as Britomart, and Mount Eden Station as Mount Eden, for that matter, in the same way that I continue to refer to the London Overground lines by their original names. Case in point, the North London line from Stratford to Richmond. There's a preserved steam locomotive here in New Zealand that shares her name with a song, one that was made famous by Laura Brannigan in 1982, although her version was not the original. The locomotive in question is J1211, built by the North British Locomotive Company in 1939, and she was given the name Gloria at some point after being saved for preservation. One of numerous things that stands out in the Gloria song is the main riff, which is borderline identical to the riff in Saturday Night's Alright for Fighting by Elton John. Thinking back to the Laura Brannigan song, I think it's alright, but I prefer Self-Control, another cover song recorded by Laura, albeit in 1984, 2 years after she scored that big hit with Gloria. I'm a regular user of the bus network here in Tauranga, and quite frankly, I've had it with the sheer amount of times motorists waltz right on past a bus that's trying to leave a stop, instead of simply holding back to let the bus go in front. To these motorists, I highly recommend taking 5 seconds out of your precious lives and showing some basic courtesy to the bus drivers. It's not just in Tauranga. I also recall seeing that kind of casual rudeness in Auckland and Christchurch too. Not so much in Wellington, because I haven't ridden on their buses as often as those in the other cities I've just mentioned. There's a random song that I remember discovering back in 2022, and the song in question is Disco Duck by Dees and his cast of idiots. Was that band name an attempt at self-deprecating humour or something? Anyway, the song was recorded in 1976, and has often been raked over the coals by people who consider it to be one of the worst songs of all time. Personally, my absolute least favourite song of all time is not actually Disco Duck, although it happens to be another song recorded in 1976. As for Dees' novelty song that somehow became a #1 hit, I think it's amusingly naff, and I remember my dad saying that there's something to be said for even the dumbest or most simplistic songs, especially in the crazy world in which we're currently living. In saying that, Dad's not actually a fan of the Disco Duck song himself. Something that really gets on my nerves is most advertisements. Not just the ones you see on YouTube, but also those out in the real world. I know that ads are supposed to entice people towards a given product or service, but most of the time, they're so fucking cringeworthy that I want nothing to do with the businesses in question. There are some businesses in particular that I refuse to visit primarily because I can't stand their shitty ads. Case in point, a certain chain of fried chicken restaurants. I also despise a certain food delivery service, because their advertising is rather aggressive and built on terrible puns and a theme that essentially insults our intelligence. The way I see it, they make blanket assumptions about what people think the business does and doesn't deliver. Those dialogue ads that you hear on the radio, or supermarkets in some cases, are especially horrendous. In case you don't know what I mean by a dialogue ad, they are made out to be a normal conversation like you would have with friends or family, or whoever else you might be talking to, but the problem is that the script and performances of the actors are so obviously unnatural that it sounds nothing like how people would actually talk in a normal conversation. I refer to this sort of thing as forced realism because it comes across as the advertisers trying to paint a blatantly unrealistic scenario and still expecting people to treat it as something perfectly normal. It's bullshit! I can't stand people driving along in their cars and blasting horrendously loud music. Not necessarily because the music is absolute shit, although that is often the case, but simply because I doubt that many people actually enjoy hearing music that's so loud to the point where you can easily hear the distortion. Come to think of it, I wouldn't be surprised if some of those music-blasting drivers have gone deaf, in which case, I really do wonder why they think it's a good idea to have the volume turned up so fucking high. When the rock band Autograph sang "Turn Up the Radio", I don't think they meant to turn it up as loud as some of these drivers have done. I realised something important last week, after I didn't even have the guts to walk inside the Maryvale Community Centre for the Neurodivergent event, which I brought up in the prototype Random Thoughts video. I think one of the main things that's holding me back from anything other than frustrating social isolation is the fact that I'm so afraid of the potential for awkward, or otherwise uncomfortable, interactions that I end up trying to avoid them as much as possible, even if that means shutting out potentially golden opportunities. That, admittedly stupid, fear would partially explain why I keep to myself as much as I can if I'm at a heritage railway, and why I hated my time at the Mid-Hants Railway as much as I did. With any luck, this dumb situation should improve as time goes on, although I'm torn between two mindsets where this situation is concerned. One is optimistic, and the other is so cynical that it could give George Carlin a run for his money. In saying that, I actually think George Carlin was pretty fucking funny, especially when he was talking about flying on the airlines in his Jammin' in New York show. One part of that show that always sticks out in my memory is the bit where he's saying, "About this time, so-and-so's telling you to get on the plane. Get on the plane, get on the plane." I say, "Fuck you, I'm getting in the plane!" One of my favourite British diesel locomotives is the Class 20, otherwise known as Chopper due to her English Electric prime mover sounding like a helicopter. But as much as I like the Class 20, her design has always confused me. For the longest time, I always thought the front end of a locomotive was always determined by which end the cab was located, but I've since been told that, in the case of British diesels at least, the front, or number one end, was actually determined by the location of the roof fan and big radiator grills. So in the case of the Class 20, the cab is technically at the back of the locomotive, and it has one control stand for each direction of travel. Come to think of it, there's a diesel here in New Zealand, namely the DE class of 1952, that has a very similar basic outline to the Class 20, although the cab interior is laid out in a way that's more like the Class 08, with controls duplicated on each side, but they both face the direction of the long hood. Recently, I randomly thought about who the people would be if I could be friends with just one celebrity and one massively popular YouTuber, as in someone with more than 1 million subscribers. If I was sufficiently lucky as to make friends in such high places, the celebrity would be either Tony Basil or Mark Knopfler. The latter was the lead guitarist, singer and songwriter of the rock band Dire Straits, while the YouTuber would be either Brett Cooper or Sydney Watson. In saying that, I wouldn't want to be in the public eye as much as they are. Indeed, the reason why my videos are always presented by a disembodied voice is because I'm not at all comfortable with doing a piece to camera. As for why I've used footage of the Tyne and Weir Metro for this segment, it is in reference to the fact that Mark Knopfler grew up in Newcastle upon Tyne, and also because the overall sound of the obscure Tony Basil song Breakaway reminds me of northeast England for some reason. And there you have it, another round of random thoughts that would not fit in a normal Train Simulator or Train Sim World video. As for whether or not I'll do another video of this nature in the future, it depends on whether or not I have another wave of random ideas about which I feel like venting. For now, I don't know what the next big video will be, so I'll just take the road as it comes. Incidentally, the phrase, "take the road as it comes," always reminds me of a Dire Straits song by the name of News.